Hello and welcome to Take Your Time, a Persona 5 Royal in real-time podcast where even there's not many things happen in Persona 5, we're still going to play it in real time even though it's a little bit silly because it's fun to do and that's what we promised all those months ago. Hello everyone, I'm Jonathon Dornbush and I'm joined as always by my co-host Tom Marks.
Hello.
Hello, as we continue our playthrough through Persona 5 Royal. Though, as we said last week, this is a little bit of a funky time for the playthrough if you are trying to play through week by week. Of course, we're sort of in the, end game cutscene bonanza that you get, the denouement of the entire Persona 5 Royal story after 100 plus, perhaps 200 plus hours. So, as we said last week, I think first recommendation is don't feel the need to play the way we're playing these next few weeks. Watch the ending when you want to watch the ending. We don't want to hold you up from that sort of catharsis that comes with it altogether. But that said, we're going to be talking specifically about 2 days of the calendar this week that come up in the game, February 14th and February 15th, aka Valentine's Day, and another day, where it's sort of Valentine's Day again, but we'll get into that, because everyone gives you chocolate. But before we get there, we do have a bit of housekeeping and such to do, not related, of course, to the TV show House. And Tom, why don't we start with an answer to last week's pop quiz question?
Yes, so this was my last-minute pivot pop quiz question, which was...
Right, I messed you up, right.
Yeah,
right,
yeah. Sai says that she's gonna get a new job, basically, and when she's talking to you in the prison last week, so I said, what is Sai's new job? Jonathon, you might have already seen comments.
I saw a lot of comments before. I was thinking It was a different line of legal practice, I think, at the end of the day was sort of where I went. But yeah, there were quite a few people who got it right. Yeah. This dialogue is very funny to me because Sai is like, you could even say you taught me how to live, which is such a, aren't you, how old are you? It's because
never quite made clear.
They can't say you taught me how to love because you can't romance Sai. So
there you go. So Sai's new job, as CC Mac and Thomas both got were correct in the YouTube comments, was she's going to go become a defense lawyer because she wants to help people now rather than ruthlessly pursue prosecutions, I suppose. I don't fully know what the moral implications of what they're saying there are, but it is nice that Sai has this character arc of realizing that just convicting people is not always what she wants to be doing. She wants to be helping people. And she's come around, and you've changed her heart, even though you didn't literally change her heart.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. I don't know the full extent of the legal system and what sort of morally does and doesn't work in Japan versus America. Obviously, there are different legal shows about U.S. law and the different types of attorneys that do things, and usually some are presented as the bad guys and some are not. But yeah, that's kind of the extent to law for me.
But it also changes a lot, even in media that you see, right? Sometimes the defense lawyer is the weaselly person defending criminals and getting them off from murder, and other times the defense lawyer is the pro bono person saving the day and helping the defenseless people. And so it's I appreciate the journey Sai has gone on here, and I appreciate what this means to her personally and her sort of growth, but it also it's not a black and white sort of this is the objectively morally better thing for her to be doing necessarily.
I guess not helping potential cover-ups on the side of the police and government is probably not doing that is better. But,
after the stuff she's seen,
it's probably
defense lawyer is maybe a step up.
It's not difficult, I think, to be a little more morally just than that.
Right.
Also, just for reference, last week I did see a few comments about it. I was mostly joking at it when we were talking about how after all of this, it was Oya who was able to get a witness to talk to you. And I was joking about how they probably should have been better lawyers and gotten them to start, get them talking from the beginning. I know that Shido was threatening them. I know he held a huge amount of power. It was just more of a funny thing that it was Oya, of course, was the one who did it when these really good people at their jobs weren't even able to help push them past the worry that Shido would hurt them. And I think it also shows throughout the game, just how much Shido, his power reigned through over everything.
Yeah, totally.
Other than that, though, we did have a few comments and questions, including one. Tom, did you want to read this one, or do you want me to read it?
I can read it. I'll read it.
You had picked it out, so I didn't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'll read it. So
Okay.
This was a comment from the X Downpour on YouTube, which I thought was really interesting because last week we were talking about the end and how it sort of inserts itself into the base game's end, and how I wasn't like totally a fan of that, but also did like the stuff that was inserted. And we sort of put it out there of like, what would this be like if you were only playing, if you'd only played Royal, if you didn't know how the base game was supposed to go? And the X Downpour is one of those people. And so they commented and said, I've never actually played base Persona 5, just P5 Royal. I honestly think without Maruki's story and the third semester, the story would end on an unsatisfying note for me. Which is weird to say, considering, like Tom pointed out, a heck of a lot happens where the original game ends. But personally, I was let down by Shido's arc. Which is a really interesting point. I think this is a very interesting take. He was the least interesting palace ruler for me after Kaneshiro. His story relied on his connection to prior events and the shock factor of him being the mastermind behind it all. Yaldabaoth was pretty awesome, especially as I didn't know where the standard Persona ending was like, or the twist about Igor. But they both felt like standard fare for a video game ending, just very well executed standard fare. I think that's totally a fair point, right? Like, I think that is a completely valid stance to have and take. And obviously, everyone's opinion and interpretation of this stuff, nobody's is invalid necessarily.
For sure. I think, just to like cut in there with the Shido stuff, I totally get where he's coming from, because I do think there have been times where like they obviously seed Shido into your story a little bit earlier, not just with, the original Joker moment, but running into him at the buffet and a moment or here or there like that. But he doesn't have the like full understanding of his connection doesn't really come until that palace and everything there. Whereas like you do now have a lot of through fare with Maruki throughout the story. Like you do get a lot more time with Maruki than you do with Shido.
What I will say, and again, not invalidating this point at all, because I think it's completely valid. What I will say is I think that Shido being a letdown is partially intentional. Like I think that there is a part of like this build up towards Shido, and then you beat Shido and nothing is better is like part of the point of like the problem is not with one face like named villain. The problem is with the attitude of society as a whole. And I think that is a little bit intentional, but I do also completely agree that they are pretty standard video game villain in contrast to Maruki, who is very, very interesting as a bad guy. And X Downpour continues and says, Maruki, on the other hand, delivers a truly unique villain, not just for Persona, but most games in general. Totally agree with that. Sympathetic villains have been done many times before, but I don't know of many where I can say I genuinely like them as a person and think that at their core, they're a great person who I wish was half as thoughtful and caring. Who I wish I was half as thoughtful and caring as. Usually it's a person with a tragic backstory doing an obviously harmful thing, but with sympathetic reasons. I do agree it could have been integrated throughout the game better, but honestly it's kind of shocking they were able to integrate it into the base game at all, when I feel like most games wouldn't even attempt something like that. It would be so easy to screw up. I think that's all totally fair, right? And something we talked about explicitly last week, right, is like, what they've done here is impressive, for sure. And even though I think that there are ways that they could have done it better or ways that it did harm other parts of the game, the way that they did it is very, very good still.
It's hard to imagine without fundamentally just redeveloping the game, being able to integrate it in much of a better way. That doesn't mean it can't have problems, but it still is like, like we can both agree that it is incredibly impressive what they did, but also there may be some better ways, but with the caveat that like, to do that, you probably would need to fundamentally redesign parts of the game or redevelop entire things, which is... And I think that's why most game developers just go with the, Final Fantasy VII Remake intergrade route, where it's just like, oh, this is just a different thing that you just like, it's just an expansion that is separate, right? And it adds some story and adds some context to the story. It teaches you things you didn't know before, but also it is fundamentally separate. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because, like, side stories I guess expansions like that in DLC has become somewhat rarer and somewhat transformed. Like, obviously, The Witcher got a few big ones that get integrated in, but something like Horizon also has a big expansion, but it's kind of like, oh, there's a new area to the north you didn't know about, and you can just go there. But, like, for a linear RPG like this, where it's kind of like you are on a set path, it's harder to be like, oh, yeah, and then we threw an area in for you to go explore. So it makes sense based on the, like, construction of this game, I think.
Yeah, but anyway, I thank you, Extempore, for that that sort of perspective from somebody who hadn't played the base game, because I think it's really interesting that it worked really well for you, and it you know, it was a more satisfying ending where I saw it as like a dilution of the original that I knew. You saw it as just a kind of a continuing build-up. Is really that's a great perspective to have.
No, absolutely. Thank you for writing in with all those thoughts, because as we said, we wanted that perspective, and I think it totally absolutely makes sense where you're coming from on it. Further on the comments, we also have another one from Mitch, who said, great episode. I remember Tom saying previously he likes the new characters from Strikers more, which I would love to hear him talk about why at some point. Personally, I love the Royal characters way more, but that's because I didn't like the Yo-Yo character in Strikers, being vague for spoilers in case. I don't know who that is, so hopefully that's not a spoiler to anyone else. I assume...
I appreciate the delicacy here from Mitch, but also it is a spoiler you will learn in the first, like, 2 hours of the game. Like, I think you learned it in the demo of the game, even.
Oh, then maybe I did and I just don't remember.
Yeah, so it's not a huge thing or anything.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about this more. I think we have some plans that we're going to share in the next couple weeks in terms of Striker stuff, and, like, you'll definitely have I'll have an opportunity to talk about this more. But yeah, I definitely full-heartedly liked the two characters in Strikers more than the basically two characters in Royal. And I think fundamentally the reasoning, and what I can say without getting into spoilers, is similar to what we talked about last week, in that I liked Maruki, I liked Sumire, but, like, they feel very much like, to a certain extent, props to be used in a specific way in that game, where their arcs are very sort of, like, scheduled and made a big deal out of, and also they're held very, very to, like, the end to, like, get all of the really important stuff for them doesn't happen until very late. And in Strikers, they are just full characters that are there from the very beginning. They're written. That's the benefit of writing them in from the start of the story, and knowing where they're going and knowing where everything is going, is that they can just be fully integrated and their arcs can be more interesting, basically. I'll avoid spoilers for now, but, like, I think that just basically they feel more fully fleshed and just interesting to me generally.
Yeah. I'm excited to get there and talk about it and find out whether or not you're crazy. But
I totally own up if people don't. If some people like Sumire and Maruki.
No, I'm very excited to talk about that eventually. And yeah, like you said, I think we'll probably discuss things more as we get down to the last couple episodes. But we do want to cover Strikers and want to do that. I would say we are definitely thinking about the show in general in the future. But do you want to say, I guess, like, the immediate, like, don't expect thing, I guess?
Oh yeah,
to not set people's expectations. We are definitely looking at sort of, like, finishing up Persona 5 Royal and taking a bit of a break after that.
There was lots of to-do even by us about how P4 Golden's calendar starts like a week after or 2 weeks after P5
It's so
ours.
perfect, yeah, and it
really
time
lines
this
up
year,
nicely.
I think,
yeah. It is. The dates line up this year.
Yeah.
But there's a lot going on that we don't feel like we're able to just jump right into another giant JRPG podcast, basically.
Yeah.
We've got more planned, but it's definitely, like, don't expect another full year right away, basically.
And never say never. Like,
Sure.
It's obviously something we would love to do, because I think we both want to play Golden very much. But yeah, it's sort of a, like, life and the reality of things of jumping right into it is just going to be too much of a struggle. But we will have some fun stuff, I think, going forward, even if it isn't directly Persona 4 Golden. But yeah, just don't prep to start that just yet. And hopefully maybe by the time we do, it will be on consoles as well. But
right.
Fun thing, it's like we got used to doing a weird calendar shift with Persona 5 this year. So, we could do that with Persona 4. We're used to it.
Yeah, it'll just be the opposite shift.
Exactly. It'll line up in like 7 years. It'll be perfect for everyone. Anyway, other than that, just wanted to quickly read an email as well that we got into, doornology@gmail.com, which you can write into if you have thoughts. This is Marco who wrote in, who probably won't be hearing this for a few weeks or months. But Marco wrote in and said, my first JRPG. And said, hey guys, I started playing Persona 5 because my friend won our video game fantasy league, and the consequence was to play Persona 5. I'd never played a JRPG before, so I was apprehensive, but 50 hours in, I can safely say I'm loving it, as I heard about the podcast through Kinda Funny. Shout out to those boys and gals, and thank you for the shout outs. And I've been really enjoying having it as a companion piece to my first playthrough. For context, I'm now entering Okumura's Palace the same week as Horizon Forbidden West and Elden Ring come out, so while my progress may slow down a bit, I'm confident I'll see Persona through to the end because of this podcast, which we very much appreciate. Now for my question comment. I feel like there's not many flaws to this game, but one of my main complaints is that your individual relationship statuses or confidant ranks are not reflected within the group as a whole. For instance, I maxed out An's confidant very early and romanced her, but it's never acknowledged by the group. And even worse, Ryuji, Morgana, and Yusuke act totally inappropriate towards her despite being my friends. At one point when the group is coaxing Futaba out of her shell, someone, I think Ryuji, even says it's not like any of us are in a relationship, even though An and Joker are right there. I realize this would be a lot more complicated to integrate from a game design standpoint, but I feel like they could have at least removed a few lines of dialogue to create less narrative dissonance. So my question is, did either of you experience this in your playthroughs? And if so, what were the examples and did it bother you? Again, loving the show. Hope to hear your responses in the future when I get caught up all the way. Marco. And Marco, thank you for writing in. Hope you eventually catch up and hello again. But I understand where you're coming from very much because I have had those moments of disconnect in the game. But I also feel like you answered your question a little bit in there in terms of just like it was probably a complexity on a game design level and a budgeting and a time thing, because I guess they could, maybe the easiest solution is to remove a couple lines of dialogue here or there. But if you wanted more like, oh, you're in a relationship, so there's going to be different dialogue here. Or, oh, you're at rank 10 with Ryuji, so Ryuji's going to act a little bit differently to you here, means more voice acting, more translation time into a bunch of different languages, more making sure those scenes don't break depending on what path people have taken. I'm speaking very broadly because I have not designed a game like this, but I imagine those things are probably some of the biggest stopping points. But I agree with you. It would have been nice for those moments to exist.
Well, the funny thing is the relationship thing with Ryuji, like it technically you never really like disclose to anybody that you're in a relationship with anybody, and you can even see that where they do have that moment. I guess probably the person writing in, if excuse me, I forget their name already because I am an empty vessel.
Marco, how dare you?
Marco probably isn't at this point yet in their playthrough. But there is that moment in the cafe where somebody is like, would you want to get married one day? And if you're dating someone, the person you're dating gets a little sweat drop.
You do
thing.
get that, yeah.
And so they do a little bit of that. And also in that moment, it is sort of like you're keeping your relationship under the table a little bit is the implication.
That's true, yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of that stuff. But it is also true that, like, the game doesn't track where you are with anybody, right? That's the greatest example, and he was asking for examples of, or they were asking for examples of how this affected us, if it did. And we've brought it up a million times, is Mishima, right?
Yeah.
Mishima, you can constantly ghost him because who knows how far along that relationship path you are. So it has to plan for those eventualities, and it is absolutely weird and awkward at times. But
yeah,
I think that they definitely could have done more than that, but probably the amount of dialogue already in this game should not be underestimated.
Yeah, I think that is one of the biggest things is like the time it takes to translate this entire script, both written and voiced, and then to have voice actors in multiple languages record that stuff.
It's nuts. There's so much dialogue in this game.
And that's actually a really big thing of game design that I think doesn't get talked about as much, but can be such a big sticking point, is like just the literal scripts and things. And often we actually at work published a couple pieces about this, but like where that stuff even comes in the game development can matter a lot, because some studios prioritize it and some don't. And so it's like I think a lot of places are getting better about it, but someone just like, well, that's the story we wrote and recorded, so we have to stick to that. And then like, so maybe someone would have thought of this idea mid game design, but they didn't want to have to change it because they already recorded 100 hours of dialogue between people.
Yeah, there's stories, right, of developers in more linear games designing a scene on a plane where your character is fighting somebody on a plane, and then suddenly they had to cut a level where you no longer need to be on a plane, but you have all these things written and recorded. So, like, how do you smooth out the fact that, like, how do you reuse that stuff? Yeah, and I imagine that this game is just an incredibly complex puzzle of voice lines that, you know, we talk already about, like, how impressive it is how they've integrated the third semester stuff, and I think probably we talk also about how they could have done it better, but I think even, again, what they did is probably an astronomical feat on its own.
Yeah. It's a really interesting, like, complex problem that you bring up, Marco, and so I do appreciate it, because it's absolutely something I've thought about. Like, oh, it would be so cool if, especially in the group, maybe if you were at rank 10 with Ryuji but not with everyone else, he would, you know, speak up more in conversation, or you'd have a slightly different dialogue option. And maybe that's something they can do in Persona 6, who, like, obviously we have no idea what the status of that game is, other than probably it's being worked on. But yeah, it's something that I think would make those relationships more satisfying to the player if you tried to only max out some, or you know, really focus on some in your playthrough. But yeah, I think it probably just comes down to like a time and budget thing.
Sure.
But I think that's it on the comment side for now. Thank you to everyone who continues to write in on the YouTube channel. I'm going to respond to some right after we record this. And thank you to everyone who's been writing into dornology@gmail.com. But with that said, Tom, let's dive in to our week of Persona 5 Royal. Or the 2 days that we have to cover.
2 days!
This is, of course, February 14th through February 20th, a.k.a. February 14th, the Day of Love, and February 15th, the Day of Chocolate. And we're going to, you know, go over these days. I don't think we need to, you know, belabor the point too much.
And I have some insight here for a little bit of that, but let's talk about Valentine's Day.
Yeah, let's start off with Valentine's Day, which, of course, is dependent, I believe, if you're dating someone. If you're not, I don't really know what happens.
I actually don't either. I think you just hang out.
Maybe you have like since the game is, unfortunately, with the romances, only gender specific and only focuses on the women for Joker to date. Maybe you just have a boys' night.
Let me look it up. You keep going.
So anyway, February 14th, essentially you're working with Sojiro for the day. It's just one of those like tough days, getting through the grind of the cafe. It makes me sort of like wistful for the idea of working at a quiet cafe, even though I have worked in food service and know people can be a nightmare, so it's a trade-off. But customer-wise, people can be very grumpy. But anyway, You're having this day with Sojiro, working with him. He realizes it's Valentine's Day all of a sudden, and he basically asks you if you're going to be doing anything, and then, coincidentally, your date walks in. And as I wrote down, Makoto walks in, and the music gets sexy, with like 12 X's, because it starts to get a little like smooth jazzy, I think. And you have a cute date scene with whoever you're dating, again, if you're dating someone. Tom, have you found anything on the non-dating side?
No, I haven't really.
Okay. Interesting. Well, if anyone out there who's been playing didn't date anyone, let us know. Also, I guess if you dated Sumire, let us know. In case
I did that last time.
Okay, you did. Does anything like, is it just sort of a normal cute date scene, or?
It's just a date. It's the same thing, right? I think all of these dates are very similar, where it's like you're hanging out in the coffee shop just sort of talking, and then they give you chocolate. But there was some cute little specific things for Haru, at least.
Yeah.
I don't know about for Makoto.
Yeah.
Haru said that she made the chocolate she gives you herself.
Oh, I don't know if Makoto says that. But.
Yeah, she says she made it from scratch, and then you can ask and be like, did you grow the beans? And she was like, well, no, I didn't start that early, but maybe next year. And it's like really cute.
That's adorable.
And then also in the Haru scene, part of the conversation is that she talks about how she got a job offer at Okumura, basically, to work there as an employee, and how she still wants to do her little cafe, but, she wants to start as an employee and get experience and learn like that, which is funny as the, primary shareholder in the entire company or whatever, but also she is still just a high school student. And I appreciated this scene because I thought it was just going to be like cutesy dating scene, but it actually does give you, like, you're rewarded for quote unquote going deeper on the relationship with the person you chose with a little bit more story and a little bit more of a continuation of their story arc than you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Are you laughing because I said going deeper? I meant emotionally, Jonathan.
I know. Anyway, yeah, I, on the same end of that, did get chocolate. I believe it was chocolate from Makoto. That is funny. I wrote down in my notes, I'm like, why am I getting an SP item from her now? And that will obviously continue.
I think, for the record, the reason you get all these, because you get some items at the end of the game too otherwise, and I believe all the items you get carry over to New Game Plus is the reason that they work, and so, or the reason you get them. Which is cute.
But yeah, it's one of those funny things where I guess, like, if you're not planning to play again, it's like, what is the point of this? But yeah, on the Makoto side of things, and definitely if other people were, not just on the non-dating side, but if you dated other people than we did, obviously I know a couple people in the comments dated on, for Makoto, it was her, talking a little bit about, like, wow, are we, like, actually in the real world now? Because, obviously they're romantic and just went through living in a non-real world. But she talks about how she's going to apply to law school and still wants to become a police commissioner. Is kind of focused on that journey. So I do think whoever you're speaking with, you do get a little bit about, like, what they're looking ahead to further. I know that Makoto very much, I assume Haru too, is kind of like, within these 2 days, we kind of look at the fact of, and earlier, of just, like, having to leave and knowing that this will be long distance for a little bit, right, potentially is like a frustration point for them, but they try not to dwell on it too much. Mm-hmm. That comes up here a little bit. My biggest note from this was Makoto comes in and the two of you are, like, sitting next to each other in a booth. Your date comes in and you're sitting next to each other. And I was just like, why is Joker still wearing his apron from work? Like, dude, take that off. That doesn't need to be part of the date. Unless it's their thing, then I guess, go for it. But he still had other clothes on. So that's all I'm saying. The apron I'm just saying the apron seemed unnecessary for any purpose. Unless they're doing, like, he's the owner of the cafe and she's like, are they doing some sort of thing there? I don't know. Anyway, that was what I thought about for most of this scene. It was like, why is he wearing the apron? Why is the apron there? That was what I cared about mostly.
This conversation went places I was not expecting.
That's fine. It's perfect conversations for us to have on a Sunday morning. So that's pretty much Valentine's Day. It's a cute scene. Again, it's one of those things where, like, it's more of a reward, I think, for having decided to date someone in the game and to see a little bit more of those relationships grow and have an idea of where these characters exist beyond the story, in terms of where their careers may go. But for both of us, it sounds career-oriented. I would not be shocked if Ans is related to modeling.
Well, the other thing is, it occurs to me now that Haru and Makoto are the two that are graduating, right?
True, yeah.
So they're looking forward because they're almost done with high school. Yeah. Whereas the other high school-aged ladies you could date would still be in high school, so I'm not sure what they would talk about.
I really like if you're dating an adult and one of them is like, yeah, I'm thinking of starting a new career. It's like, okay, come on. Come on now. Like, what do you and Chihaya talk about?
Oh, God.
I just don't see chemistry.
I dated Chihaya in the base game.
Oh.
It was a mistake. I was choosing between, this is a fun story. I was choosing between Hifumi and Chihaya. And I should have just stuck with my guns and gone Hifumi. Mm-hmm. Because Chihaya does this thing that's, like, very off-putting. That relationship gets really weird really quick. Oh. So she's, like, very like sweet and, you know, normal sort of like wanting to date you at first, and then like it flips 180 degrees instantly, where the moment you're dating her, I think it might even, if it's not in your rank 10 scene, it is in the first scene that you get with her right after that, of like the first like dating sort of scene, but I think it's in the rank 10 one, is she literally says to you like, by the way, I saw you looking at that girl while we were out the other day. What does that mean? And it's like, she gets jealous, angry.
Oh.
Immediately.
Oh,
and
boy.
it's like incredibly uncomfortable right away.
Oh, man. She should maybe have a few sessions with Maruki then. That
It's
sounds
like
like a problem. Yeah.
It genuinely goes from like 0 to 60 very quickly in terms of like, whoa, this is not the person I thought I was about to get into a relationship with.
I mean, to be fair, it is fun, I guess, in the idea that they do make some of the relationships feel very different from each other.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
yeah, that's definitely like a pull the rug out from underneath you of, yeah.
I just was, it was not what I was expecting from her personality. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and you should have definitely just shogoed with Hifumi.
Shogied?
Shogoed.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Anyway, moving on to February 15th.
Yes, please.
Here is the day where you sort of do mini dates with all of the people you're not dating.
Yeah, so this is what I wanted to provide context on. In Japan, this is 100% a cultural thing.
Totally.
So compared to the States or potentially the West, I don't know how Valentine's Day is handled outside of the U.S., but in the U.S., traditionally, again, this is all very, you know, traditional definitions of this. Usually we expect guys to give girls gifts and chocolates or whatever. That's like the normal gender role sort of thing.
Yeah. I will say the only difference that I had, at least growing up, was like during elementary school age, we kind of would get Valentines for everyone in the class.
Yeah,
like you would get small things for everyone. But yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. In Japan, Valentine's Day is generally, again, this is all very like stereotypical traditional gender role, how it's defined. Generally in Japan, Valentine's Day is a day for women to give men chocolate. And you give like fancy chocolates to the person you like, and like cheaper chocolates or like normal chocolates to platonic relationships and friends, just as like a sign of respect and that you like them. Not as like them, but just as like, that's just like a normal thing, is that the girls will give the guys chocolates, their friends chocolates. And then on White Day, which is something we'll get to in about a month in the game, which is March 14th, so a month later, is an opportunity for the guys that got chocolate gifts from their girlfriends to give chocolate gifts back as like a platonic thing.
That's nice.
So that is the cultural sort of relevance here.
Okay.
If you don't have that context, going into February 15th in this game is just a parade of the girls in the game giving you chocolate and being like, hey, it's no big deal, don't worry about it, we're just friends, and then like moving on to the next one.
Yeah.
It's like very, and this is a Royal Edition, I believe, and it's
I don't remember it in the base game.
Yeah, it's sort of funny. It's really funny how much they hammer home that this isn't a big deal, this is totally casual, don't worry about it. Like,
I would wonder how much they play it up in the English translation versus whatever the original Japanese text translates to, if only because it is not normal for, at least in my, experience, American culture to do that. So maybe they're hammering it home to be like, this isn't weird, we do mean this. It's not like suddenly you're dating everyone. But it is a cultural thing that still should happen here in this context, so that's why it's happening.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you get all these little scenes, right, where you're going to all these different locations throughout the day and seeing all the girls that you know, and they give you chocolate, and it's very, very cute.
And it's all New Game Plus related items, again. Like, these are all items you wouldn't be able to use. Or will you? You'll find out soon. Who knows? The final boss is coming.
This is also the day where if you're dating multiple people, you get your comeuppance.
Yeah. Did this happen
So-
for you?
No.
Okay, it happened.
I've only ever looked this up.
Oh, it happened to a friend of mine who listens to the show. I hope I'm not putting them on blast. They told me what happens with that,
Yeah.
basically, yeah.
So if you are dating multiple people, what happens is Sai shows up in the morning and gives you a chocolate because she can't be dated, so you still always get a chocolate from her.
My headcanon, though, with her was, since I was dating Makoto, is that she's coming over to be like, stay away from my sister. Just kidding. Here's chocolate from me also.
And then what happens is all the dating relationship possibilities that you didn't have a Valentine's Day date with show up and yell at you and beat the crap out of you and then leave. And if you do that if you're dating every single option in the game, literally a mob of like a dozen women will just come into the cafe, yell at you incessantly, and then beat the crap out of you and leave, which frankly, at that point, Joker deserves.
It's real funny. Oh my god. Yeah, I don't think I dated multiple people in my base P5 playthrough either, so I never saw that. But yeah, that is a very funny. I could see that especially being a problem for most people because of the way they push the Sumire relationship. So a lot of people may just do that because it does feel like the thing you're supposed to do, even if you're dating someone else.
Yeah.
That's really funny. So yeah, I guess that happens, and I assume they don't give you items also.
Yeah, there's a little line that's like they took their chocolate with them or something like that, because they all show up with gifts. They all show up with individually wrapped presents.
Oh, that's so crushing.
And then they leave. So the only way to get chocolate from everyone is to only date one person.
Okay.
Or I guess maybe date no one. Then you'll get all the little friend chocolates.
Because presumably, does it happen with everyone or just everyone you've maxed out?
I don't know, actually.
Okay.
I don't know if it's... I assume it's maxed out.
Because,
maybe
yeah,
not.
I have written down, Sai comes to the cafe. Oh, yeah, shows up at the train station. An is at school. Sumire before you get to class.
Makoto before Sumire.
Okay, there we go.
Yes.
Then it's Haru after Sumire. Haru in the hallway. Hifumi outside of school.
Hifumi, who does not go to that school and has no reason to show up at your school.
How'd she get there so quickly?
It's a great question.
Chihaya, excuse me, at the train. Chihaya comes to the train station again as well. Sojiro then leaves us to watch the shop, and then Kawakami comes in to bring chocolate, and then Futaba came to give me chocolate. And that's...
Takemi before Kawakami, too.
Oh, I don't think I saw Takemi for some reason.
Did you not max Takemi?
I thought I did, but maybe not. Huh. Well, or I just didn't write it down. That is also very possible.
Probably that one.
It was a string of like 12 people giving me chocolate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got a lot of chocolate. You're not going to use those items on that playthrough, so you know.
Nope.
I
guess I like that. I like that this end sequence stuff, because there's a little bit more of this too, as I said, and I appreciate that a lot of the like maxing out or dating someone or, you know, as we get forward, like other little gifts that you get results in benefits for the next run, I think is cute, right? I'm not going to go into a New Game Plus, but it's definitely a game that I have replayed.
Yeah.
And the idea that my actions in the first playthrough benefit my second one is really cool.
Yeah, well, and especially what I like about it is I don't think, like, it doesn't take away from this denouement section. Like, you're not losing out on anything because it's not like there is going to be a whole new palace for you to explore here. So it is just absolutely a benefit that if you decide to play again, here is something to help you get your feet off the ground.
Yeah.
Which, you know, maybe I'll do it before we do Persona 4 Golden. Who knows? Maybe I'll just do a Persona 5 Royal run again on New Game Plus and listen to our show. That would be not fun for my brain. But that's pretty much this week. February 15th and 16th, or 14th and 15th, excuse me. 16th through the 20th, all skipped. We skipped pretty much through till March, just for reference.
March 2nd.
Yeah.
So all of next week, we don't have anything, but we do for the show. We are planning to have some fun little extra stuff.
Yes, yes.
So there it's not going to be just like nothing.
Yeah, it will. I forget who told. I think it might have been my girlfriend. I think she joked that we should just sit in silence for the hour and just put that up and just see. I was like, I could just put up an hour of nothing and probably save us the time. But yeah, well, it's our most listened to episode yet. because people keep waiting. Where's the reveal? Where's the moment? And then it never comes. Anyway, even though those dates are going to be passed over, like Tom said, we'll have some fun stuff to do. And then we'll continue to cover the end game as it happens throughout March. Again, play this bit at the pace that you want to. We will cover it in the calendar that we have binded our souls to and must adhere to at all times. But yeah, before we leave, though, this week, let's briefly jump in to talk about Haru's storyline. And confidant line, because we wanted to make sure we're covering the party confidants for sure before we finish up this one. And Tom, especially as you chose to romance Haru with this playthrough, I just wanted your general thoughts on the Haru chain, and obviously we can go into specific story beats. But
Haru is a funny one because the first time you play through, she's introduced so late and is so sort of different to a certain extent in how you meet her and the kind of consequences around her, and your party is already so big that it's really easy to just like not care the first time through. But Haru is one of those confidants that in kind of analyzing her confidant line and her story, I've come to really appreciate a lot. Because her story is essentially about, it's her struggling with what does she want out of life after her father passed, and also like now she has all this responsibility of the company, and there's all this pressure, and all these people want different things from her as a person in a position of power and with all this wealth. And so it's this really complicated sort of storyline of Haru being intimidated and sort of put off by all of this stuff, not knowing how to handle it, into learning how to trust people, but also learning how to trust herself, right? She starts off in this place of not trusting anyone and comes to a place of knowing she has to be cautious, but also knowing that she needs to trust some people in order to, do anything or make any progress. There's a lot of like spinning her wheels in the beginning of this confidant line. Also, just the veggie growing is great. It's just great. I wish it was like a little more convenient. Yeah. But it's great.
Yeah, it's a really handy thing. It's, I think, unfortunately built into sort of the framework of the way conversations happen in this game, because you do have to go through like 5 different prompts essentially to pick up and then replant new things. It would be nice if there was just like a pick up plants. Would you like to plant more? Sure, go ahead, because why wouldn't you? But yeah, on the whole, like speaking to just what you were saying from the very top, I very much was that person of like Haru came in and I was like, it's late in the game, man. I like who I like already in this group. I like the combat of certain people in this group. Psychokinesis is good, but Joker had an ability from a persona, and so I was like, I don't need her at this point. And so I never really got to grow or care about Haru. And I'm so glad that we did this playthrough. I think for her benefit in terms of the main group, I think she's the character for me who rose the most in my like favorites and my appreciation of their characterization, because I do think there is so much going on there. That if you're willing to spend the time, if you're willing to focus in on, there is a really great character there, and a really complex and emotional character that I totally did not give the time of day the first time around. And that's on me to a certain extent, for sure. I agree with you. I do think her entrance into the game comes at a weird time, and I do think it causes some of that ease of kind of pushing her off. But I think if you do go down that path, it's a really, really great story of someone who is going through a lot, especially like I did tend to not really think about that in the first game. It's like, I guess you have Futaba on one end, who lost their mother, obviously, and was dealing with that in their palace. But then you have Haru, who is effectively helping to end her father. Like, obviously they don't intend for him to die, but
right.
Yeah, it's really great across the board, and I think I'm glad the most from this confidant line.
Yeah, and it's also a confidant story that is kind of layered with metaphor in a way a lot of the other ones aren't. There's a lot of there's a little bit of subtlety going on with there's a line, I think it's in her second one. So you helping her plant veggies, including coffee beans.
It's just to say, like, to go hand in hand with something you were talking about earlier. Like, she has these, obviously she is working for Okumura Foods and has this big stake now with her father's passing. But she has these designs of, she just genuinely enjoys making food that can make other people happy and wants her own little cafe. She wants to be able to deliver that sort of through her own personal means rather than this big conglomerate. But yeah, it starts off with her kind of trying to get a little bit of expertise from Sojiro.
Right. Yeah, she brings her veggies to Sojiro to try. And one of the through lines is like the stuff that she makes, the coffee she makes later in the Confident line, the veggies she makes now, are never like very good.
Yeah.
But people can sort of taste the effort that went into them, which is a thing that's missing from Okumura Foods as a whole, right? Is like it's just all manufactured, go, and you don't really, they worry about the profits, not the product and the people that are making them. And Haru stands in contrast to that of like, it's harder work to make something tastier by hand, but you know, you can taste the passion beyond that.
Yeah.
This metaphor with coffee too, where she talks about how she never liked coffee because she thought it was just bitter and she couldn't appreciate the flavor of it. And then she tried it enough that she was able to appreciate the undertones of it and the richness and the flavor beyond just the bitterness. And that's a perfect metaphor that sets up her whole sort of experience with Okumura Foods and the people at it, right? Mm-hmm. Of she's very off-put by this experience of talking to these executives and who the experience of trying to run this business. And by the end of it, she sort of understands that the things that she was finding unappealing were actually had some complexity to them, and there's parts of it that she can really appreciate, and she ends up enjoying it more. And like, I really like that metaphor. The food and the coffee metaphor with Haru works really well with her character arc as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to give some specifics of that, as you started off mentioning, it begins with her trying to figure out if she can make these better foods for people to eat. And so she has Sojiro try them at first, and she's worried that she can't really trust anyone at the company to help her on this sort of personal journey. And that further extends into, both 2 and 3 for sure, where like 2, she talks about sort of like rumors that Takakura was happy about her dad's death. Essentially, there were people who saw that as a power opportunity to like shift hands and to take over the company.
Right.
And that's something she's having to deal with as a child who now also has essentially their shares and responsibility of this. She's talking about her terrible fiance there and how essentially like the marriage was essentially for the good of the business. I think it would bring 2 kind of companies together was sort of the goal. Correct me
yes and no. It was like, I think he was just sort of like grubby, like money grubby, and like it might have been like political or something like that. It was definitely like you're being sold off to benefit the company. I just don't remember the exact specifics of it.
No, that's fair. Yeah. And then, so yeah, we get a little bit more.
That dude sucks.
The fiance?
Yeah.
Oh, from like minute 1 when like the group meets him, and he goes from being abusive to her to the group showing up and being like, nothing's wrong. Nothing. It's all fine. Like he's so bad at lying. It's just so obvious he's a terrible human being. Yeah.
Yeah.
They do a good job of making you hate that dude.
He like is pressuring her to move in with her and like get an early wedding, and like it's like holding this like you got to do it because of the contract thing over her head the entire time.
Yeah, and that sort of continues through as like the pressure of these things as she's continuing to research coffee roasting and things of that nature. She even talks about how the company used to be a beloved cafe that her grandfather sort of made. And naturally then here, of course, we get more of that the terrible fiance bringing that up. So yeah, we continue to get, I think like the biggest things for me are like the problems with the company, the problems with her family, and then the problems with this fiance all kind of coming to a head. We learn later on that Takakura wants to make a chain of low-cost cafes, essentially undermining the idea of what she's going for, where, as you said earlier, Tom, like just manufacturing this stuff and putting it out to the masses to make profit rather than making a product that they care about and that the customers can tell that they care about is a big thing for her. continuing to go through gardening and all of that stuff. And then we sort of get a surprise toward the end where Takakura may not be the most terrible guy.
Yeah.
He's given the coffee, and it turns out that he had this fondness for the original cafe that Okumura Foods once was. He kind of supports her. It's kind of the fiance contract thing. You don't need to worry about that. It's sort of one of those oh, okay.
Yeah, he says the very clear thing of well, have you seen the contract? And she's like, no.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
So it probably just doesn't exist, which is a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina, but it also is very in line with this terrible fiance being terrible.
Exactly. It sounds almost like there was a sort of verbal contract, I guess, if you want to say that, which I don't know how legally that would stand in this case, because one of the parties is presumably dead with Okumura. But yeah, it's kind of you're not, also it's a marriage thing, so it's you're not really indebted as far as anyone knows to do this. So let's just get rid of the crappy dude. And we can.
Yeah.
And obviously you at rank 9 get to choose to date her. If you're like me, you apparently tell her no on her birthday and are a terrible human being. Or if you're Tom, you say
great.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I do
you're pretty bad.
I'm a horrible human being, and because especially I do agree with you. I think she is the one who you most clearly see the excitement to be the nerves and jitteriness of putting this out there, and also the crushing defeat if you say no. There is a clear, man, she really had feelings for you sort of thing. And not that some of the others don't. I do think Makoto in the dating storyline that I've seen does have feelings for you, and I think that's conveyed well, and she's also just not that emotionally out of a person. She doesn't wear her heart on her sleeve quite as much. But yeah, the Haru scene is really crushing if you say no.
Yeah, it's you can it's like that moment from the Simpsons where you can just pinpoint the moment where her heart breaks.
Oh
right?
Yeah. It's rough.
Anyway.
Yeah. I thought you were just going to leave it as that moment from the Simpsons and be yeah.
That one moment.
That one, they only had 3 moments, so that makes sense. Yeah, and then essentially we get this sort of resolution of her wanting to open her cafe in the future, kind of understanding that putting her feelings out there, learning to trust people is important, learning to trust the right people, learning to be able to let go of the crappy people, all of this sort of stuff of coming into her own, especially without having her father in her life, are some of the lessons that get taken away. Obviously, I assume there's a little more nuance to it if you're dating her as well, but yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, but it is really a story of her learning to speak up, right? To find her voice again after being sort of in this horrible situation where everyone just sort of made decisions for her and she couldn't choose anything in her life. So it's her finding her voice, and then also I think it's really important that it's her learning to trust herself and others.
Yeah.
Because she needs to do both. She needs to be able to say this is what I want, but also I need to know who I can trust, or else nothing will get done and nothing will ever change. There's a moment when you're having lunch at Big Bang Burger with her in the, I think, 5th rank.
Yeah.
Which is such a power move because she owns the company. And she says something along the lines about how she needs to find the truth because some people are saying Takakura was glad her father died, and the other people are saying that, he was very sad and she doesn't know who to trust. And you have a line as Joker where you can just be well, someone is telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's a moment for her where she's oh, right, I was trusting nobody.
Yeah.
But it's not everyone is against me. Somebody out there I can learn from and I can put my faith in. And yeah, I just really like the sort of the arc she goes along, because it's a really terrible, heavy thing she's going through and just came out of. And yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very important context to remember that also all of this is happening after the fallout of her father, dying under mysterious circumstances that she originally thinks could have been caused by the group she just learned to trust. As you were saying, trust is a very big part of her and her storyline because of that moment as well, where she does have that occasional worry. Oh, did the group that told me everything was going to go okay lie to me?
Right.
And that's a bad basis to potentially start things out on if that were the case. And so, yeah, I I'm really glad I took the time to go through the full confidant rank with her. I definitely did not do that first time around. Growing those veggies is obviously great as well. Getting those veggies more quickly as well and bigger yields of them. They're super powerful items, kind of one-time use things to double attacks or double magic attacks or block attacks as well. They're really, really great and really helpful, especially in the late game when you don't have life wall. But then you get life wall, and then everything's meaningless.
Yeah, I think it's 2 of the items are doubling attacks, and then 2 of them are SP heal. Like one of them is
that's
like
what it
full,
is. Yes,
full
yeah,
SP.
Yeah,
and like I always went with the doubling attacks before, and then in the second half, like the third semester, the last kind of part of the game, I would always go with the SP full items because you just need to fully heal some people or fully SP some people sometimes.
You basically need to give them back to Haru. She's growing them so that she can eat them, so she can keep casting life wall on you. Is essentially the cycle of vegetation here.
Seriously, I got life wall down to like it would only cost me like 20 something SP because I had Spellmaster on her and a Akechi out, and
that's real good.
It's lovely.
It
was lovely.
That's amazing. Well, yeah, that's Haru's sort of confidant line in a nutshell. I'm again really glad that I experienced this one. I hope you did as well if you saw this one on your playthrough. If this is your first playthrough and you happen to have skipped it because it was late in the game, like I did my first time around, if you ever get around to P5 again, I do recommend spending more time with Haru because I do really think it's worth it, and I'm really, really impressed by the character work that's there. And also a little bummed that it comes so late in the game, but
I imagine more people finish her line in Royal, right? Because she is introduced so late in the base game that having those extra days in this is probably pretty valuable towards that.
Especially if you are, I assume like us, someone who focuses on the party more than ancillary characters because they can be so helpful. Hopefully this extra month did give you time to hang out with Haru as well. But yeah. That's sort of our focus on Haru's confidant line. Let us know if there are any confidant lines that we haven't covered that you want us to touch on in the next few weeks, just as we wrap up. I do think there are some side ones.
You know what this means?
What?
In terms of next week, too. Is now we got to rank the party members.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, yeah, we should...
People have been asking for that. People have been asking for rankings of party members and palaces.
True.
Which are both things I think we can do in some of these dead weeks.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, let's try to make that happen, and it's going to be tough and contentious. I think we'll come with our own lists, and then create a combined list.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're different enough. Otherwise, it's going to be a very quick conversation. Anyway, from there...
we both know what number 1 is. We have to disqualify Akechi, or Akechi's just going to be number 1.
Yeah. Anyway, number 1. Are we doing party members or confidants?
We'll figure it out.
Okay, fair enough.
Both. Yes.
Perfect. Before we wrap up, Tom, what's your pop quiz question for the week?
Okay, so this is funny because I've been struggling with trying to find things.
Yeah.
Or I was worried I was going to struggle, and this week it came to me perfectly.
Okay.
On February 15th, you're given lots of chocolates from all of the lady confidants in your life. However, one of them gives you a second gift. So the question this week is, what is the other thing you are given on February 15th, and who gives it to you?
I bet you're really happy I didn't mess this one up for you.
Don't make a sex joke.
Yeah, I guess it's good that I didn't accidentally say that during this, because there probably wouldn't have been many alternative questions for the week.
Yeah. And this does assume some things about who you did or didn't date and all that.
Okay.
But this is not including the theoretical, like, you're dating multiple people and you're given a knuckle sandwich. That's not what I'm going for here. This is something where if you I mean, obviously one of them you would have dated. If you dated this person, then you wouldn't have gotten the other thing from them.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
On February 15th.
Cool.
Let's see.
Well, then just to leave you, I'm dipping back into the well, and it's possibly a persona I've done before, but it's old now, so that's why I want to do this to mess with you. But I thought I'd start with maybe an easy one. We'll see. Who's the Cavern Snake Man, my friend?
Cavern Snake Man?
Yeah, who's the Cavern Snake Man?
Cavern?
Cavern. I'm not misreading this word. I've looked at it several times just to be sure.
I have no idea, so I'm just going to guess the one that I know a name of a snake person. Is it Raja Naga?
It is Naga. It just says Naga on the page. So I think you're right.
Wait, what?
On the wiki page that I'm on, it just says Naga. So I think you got it right.
Is Naga different than P5?
Maybe.
Is Naga and Raja Naga two different things?
Tom is looking this up as we finish the show. And while he does that, I'll continue to do sort of our exit chat, which is thank you so much for listening.
They're two different things.
Oh, well, you got it accidentally right, I guess. Well, Naga, the Cavern Snake Man, who I believe I picked from which...
Early.
Yeah, pretty early. Futaba's Palace.
Man. Yeah. Raja Naga versus Naga. That's a bummer. Yeah, Raja Naga is the gold kind of version of the snake guy.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see who I pick next week to screw with you. But that's going to pretty much wrap us up for this week's episode of Take Your Time. Tom, thank you so much as always for joining me for this
Always a pleasure.
Wonderful journey that we're on and almost coming to an end to, but have some fun before we do. Remember, if you enjoy this show, please continue to like and subscribe and give the stars and leave a comment or a review. We appreciate those, and obviously it helps out. And as we said, we're going to do some fun stuff after Royal ends and not, Take Your Time as a thing is not ending completely, so don't look at that as what's happening, even though we're not jumping into P4 Golden immediately. But we just continue to want to hang out and celebrate these games that we love with other Persona fans. Of course, if you're enjoying the show otherwise, you can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Dornology if you want the video version of just Tom and myself making goofy faces for an hour. You can also subscribe there to get new episodes when they drop every Monday, as well as tweet at us. I'm at JM Dornbush. Tom is at Tom R. Marks. And you can write into dornology@gmail.com with any questions or thoughts. But yeah, that's going to wrap us up for this week. Tom, thank you, as always. Any parting words for the audience before we go and Morgana tells us to go to sleep?
Nah.
To steal ya.